Even though this is a nonpartisan race for mayor, we know he's the Democratic candidate. Council member Andy Thomson is a product of Boca Raton. His parents met at FAU in 1967, and today he and his wife Joanna are proudly raising their 5 children right here in the community they love. Andy was elected to the City Council originally in 2018 and was re-elected in 2020 and 2024. Andy has served on numerous city and county boards and is well known for his Run the City initiative, where he and his kids ran every mile of every Boca street, about 475 miles, while picking up trash and identifying safety improvements. When he's not working as an attorney, resolving business disputes, or volunteering, Andy can be found coaching his kids' sports teams or serving at Spanish River Church, where he teaches Sunday school and helps organize their annual Serve the City project. I am very proud to welcome up my friend Andy Thomson to the stage to talk about his race for mayor.
Before I get started, let's give another round of applause for Jennifer Jenkins, who was fantastic. Fantastic. An incredibly hard act to follow, as it turns out. But it actually makes sense, you think about it, because we was talking about just now a candidate for the United States Senate, which is all the way up here, right? In fairness, big stuff going on in Washington. City of Boca Raton, where I represent now, and I'm hoping to be the next mayor, is basically on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to federal, state, local. Local is right at the bottom of that. And that suits me just fine, actually. That suits me just fine. As Tina mentioned, my roots here are incredibly deep. My parents met here almost over 60 years ago. They met in the library at FAU, which was then the brand new Florida Atlantic University. They fell in love, they got married, and I'm the result. So Boca is in my blood, quite literally. And I'm so happy to have been able to participate in our government here, because this is a place that, raise your hand if you live in the city of Boca, or West Boca, we'll count that too. All right, lots of you. Think about for this in a second, for just a second. There was something that brought you to Boca Raton. There was something about this city that made you want to come here, right? It was for a lot of you, maybe it was education, going to school like it was for my parents, or it was a job, or it was you forced to come here because your parents moved here. It sounded like your story coming to Florida, Jennifer. But there was something that brought you here. If it was your choice to come here, I want you to just think for a moment about what that was, okay? My time on the city council, like as was mentioned by Tina, I got elected originally in 2018. And the one thing that I've cared most about in that time is our quality of life. Because my sense is most of you, when you came here, there was something about our quality of life here that really resonated with you, and it was something that you wanted to have more of, and that's why you decided to move here. Because think about it, in this time, this day and age, we can literally live wherever we want. If you all wanted to live in New York like Jennifer's family did, you could do that. Perfectly possible. But a lot of us here are here because we want to be here, because Boca Raton, and for those in Delray, I like Delray too, Delray's great. I love Delray. But there's something about Boca, if you don't mind, I'll speak in a little bit more about Boca. Boca is a unique place, and it has a tremendous quality of life that is second to none, in my view, okay? And so when I've ran and gotten involved in city government, my number one priority was to do my best to maintain that quality of life as best as I could. And that takes a lot of forms. Some of the priorities I've had when I've been on the city council in Boca involve things like public safety. Somebody mentioned crime. Boca is a very safe place. We want to keep it that way. We desperately want to keep it that way, and we allocate the resources to be sure that we keep it that way. One of the things I've really been focused on too is affordability. I don't know about you all, but if anybody in the room is a homeowner, if you had to go back and buy your house right now, exactly, couldn't be done. Couldn't be done in my case. We bought our house like 10 years ago. The affordability crisis in this state has gotten so bad, and I think it's probably its most acute in a place like Boca Raton. So what we've been doing at the city council level, look, we can't fix things like inflation. That's a macro issue. We can't do that, fairness. But we do what we can to keep whatever taxes you pay to our city low. I voted to cut our tax rate, the millage rate that we apply to your home. Sorry about that, but we got to do it, to keep it as low as possible. And if you don't mind, friend in Delray, I'll just give just a quick comparison. The millage rate that we charge in the city of Boca Raton, half of what it is in Delray. It's a third of what it is in other parts of our county. So we care about affordability, making sure that our residents can afford to stay here and have as less of a burden as possible. I care desperately about the environment. I think Tina mentioned the Run the City initiative that I had. So let me tell you a little quick story about that. It was actually started in 2021. I had this idea. What does everybody do around New Year's time, friends? Resolutions. And what does just about everybody's resolution deal with?
Lose weight.
Lose weight or exercise or some variation on that, right? So I'm the same, exactly the same way. I had the idea I wanted to run more in 2021. So I started running more. And the truth is I hate running. I'm not good at it. I'm not fast.
Except for mayor.
Except for mayor. Good point. Thank you, Lindsay. I meant jogging. I should have said jogging. Well said. Yeah. So I decided I needed to jog more. And so I wake up one morning, it was the first of the year, and I run to my gym. And when I'm doing that, I'm running on St. Andrews Boulevard between my house and the gym. And I notice on my way lots of trash. And remember, if you live in Boca, this is a really clean place. But even in a place as clean and as beautiful as Boca, there was still lots of trash on the sidewalk. So it really annoyed me. Remember, these are our streets. I have a pride of ownership in where I live, right? And so I get to the gym and I do my lifting. It was probably not that great. But I go to the front desk guy and I ask him, can I have a plastic bag to take with me on my run home? Remember, I didn't drive there. I had to run back. That was foolish. But I took a plastic bag with me and I picked up all the trash that I saw along the way. Strangely though, despite getting every piece of trash that I could fit in the bag, it wasn't enough. There was actually more trash on the ground than I had room for. And so that was when I was hit with the idea, I'm gonna keep doing this, but I'm gonna bring my own bag. And wherever I run, I'm gonna clean up the trash there. So I did this for about a week. Of course, it was the same route from my house to the gym, so it was very clean. But then I got to thinking, I wonder how many miles of roads there are in our beautiful city of Boca Raton. Well, thankfully, the city has staff that knows that answer, so we found out that it was just a little bit more than 475 miles. And so I'm not Forrest Gump, and I wasn't thinking I was going to do it all in one day. That's not possible. By the way, I made that joke with some high schoolers. Crickets. Crickets. Asher, you know who Forrest Gump is? Okay, so you would have laughed at that joke, great. Well, most folks didn't. Anyway, I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make it my mission over the course of this year, this is 2021, to run every mile of every street in the entire city of Boca Raton, cleaning up trash. In 2021, I had all 5 of my kids then. So I started bringing, not all of them, 5 going on a run, it's crazy, but I would bring selections of them on all of my runs. Sometimes it would be the baby in the stroller, sometimes it would be my daughter on a scooter, sometimes it would be my son who would try to run with me. And over the course of an entire year, and by God, it took the entire year, breaking it up into chunks of 3 or 4 miles, I was able to run every mile of every street in the entire city of Boca Raton. And the trash part is good. I'll get to the results of this whole thing in a second. This is all important for several reasons. I'll tell you why in just a moment. But it wasn't just about trash. I care deeply, first of course, about having a clean city. That matters to me. But I care also about having a safe city. And safety takes on many forms. Anybody here have a relative or yourself maybe ever had to spend time in a wheelchair? Anybody? My mom was diagnosed when I was a kid, when I was 8, with MS. I know that was referenced before. My mom had the progressive form of MS, which meant that when you lose the feeling and you lose the ability to move, it doesn't come back. And so my mom spent 25, 30 years in a wheelchair. And if you've ever tried to navigate any infrastructure in a wheelchair, you see your environment differently. And I've always been very, very keen on making sure that streets and sidewalks and those kinds of things, which by the way are not built just for cars, but for everybody, are accessible by everybody, particularly folks in wheelchairs. And so when I was going out and running these miles of all these streets, it gave me a really good perspective. A perspective that you don't get if you're driving everywhere. And so I was able to identify hundreds of safety improvements that could be made on our streets. And it turns out the City of Boca Public Works Department works for us, And so when I passed these on to the city, it took a little bit of time in some cases, but all of those over 300 safety improvements have been addressed and been effective in the city. So that we did the trash, we did the safety improvements, all of which were great, but it wasn't the best part. The best part of this initiative that we eventually called Run the City was it became a community building experience. One of the best parts of this city, despite being very clean and very safe, is the people here are fantastic. And they really are community oriented. They love this place. And when we see this guy and some of his kids in a stroller sometimes or in a scooter, cleaning up their neighborhood, not my neighborhood, but their neighborhood, it started to resonate with folks. And I would get all sorts of questions of like, who is this guy and what is he doing and why is he here? But we appreciate it. And so over the course of time, I realized that this effort had the ability to bring communities together. And so what we did was we started doing kind of like a volunteer drive. So when I would be, just for an example, if I would be running and say Woodfield Hunt Club, I would find a couple of friends who lived in there. I would find a couple of nonprofits or organizations that were located near it. I'd let them know, and they would bring, you'd be surprised, there were sometimes hundreds of people that would come out to clean up the neighborhoods surrounding where they lived or worked. So for example, Addison Meisner School, I've been doing this thing for several years now, but the first year there was 150 parents and kids came out to, they don't run, they're not crazy, they walk the areas around their school, but they came out and they cleaned up something like 70 or 80 pounds of trash surrounding their community. And so over the course of time, it took a total year, I told you, to do the 475 miles, we picked up 1,300 pounds of trash. In a city, by the way, that is, Linda, you know this, clean and beautiful already. 1,300 pounds of trash, helped fix 325 safety improvements, things like broken crosswalks, missing sidewalks, missing crosswalks, potholes, stuff like that. But also had over 1,000 volunteers who came out and helped us make their city a little bit safer and cleaner. That Run the City initiative, I think, was kind of like a cornerstone. It demonstrates to you all how I approach leadership and how I approach the city that I love. Doing something like cleaning up trash or fixing potholes is not something for somebody else to do. I'm the type who wants to be down there on the ground, in the streets, doing it myself. With my kids most of the time. So in my time on the City Council, I've been there since 2018. I mentioned I've prioritized safety, I've prioritized affordability, I prioritized the environment, but I've also really done my best to try and prioritize managing our growth. City of Boca is a very attractive place to live. A lot of people want to be here, not everybody. A lot of people want to be here. A lot of people moving in from out of state to try to be here. I appreciate that. A lot of us probably at one point or another, if it wasn't us, it was our parents, moved down here, right, from another state. So I can appreciate what it is that attracts people to Boca Raton. But the balance that I have to strike as an elected official is making sure that we maintain our quality of life while also providing some mechanism for folks to be able to move here. We want to grow, but so long as it's responsibly. What we can't do is have a whole bunch of new folks overrunning infrastructure to the point where it destroys our quality of life. I can't have that. I won't have that. And so this brings me probably to, if you live in Boca or nearby and you drive through neighborhoods, you've probably seen a bunch of green signs recently. Have you seen these? Yeah, Martha knows what I'm talking about.
Save Boca.
Save Boca is what is on the signs, that's true. And that to me is, I think, a perfect emblem for what it means to try and have responsible, measured growth. I'll just give you just a quick recap on where this stands and what this is all about, and I'm sure you'll have questions about it. I'm happy to answer anything you want to know. City of Boca, despite having a really low tax rate and being very good financial stewards, weren't great about making sure that our city hall and our community center right next to it were in great shape, because they're not. They're not in good shape. One was built originally in the 60s. Police station's pretty old too. We need to get some new buildings. And I think most people appreciate that. We need to have new facilities there. Normally, if a city's in a position like that, what we do is we float a bond, we borrow money, and we pay it back over time. Cities have been doing that for a very long time. But what happened in this case was the city was approached by some developers to try and build private development on public property, meaning city-owned property. And in exchange, that revenue would help pay for the city hall and city community center that we need. Pretty early on, I said, hold on a second. We need a new city hall. Oh, I agree with that. We need a new community center, totally true. But we don't necessarily need to be giving up a whole bunch of what was then 30 acres of public land in order to finance public buildings, public facilities like a city hall and a community center. So I said, I'm happy to have a discussion with a developer that wants to help build stuff for us, but the idea of trading public property for revenue or allowing private development on public land just seems very strange. And if you know Boca, thank you. If you know Boca, we have taken a very unique approach when it comes to preserving our natural resources and our city's land. If you've ever been to Red Reef Beach or to Spanish River Beach, those are pristine, undeveloped beachfront properties that the city bought and had the presence of mind to buy decades ago to make sure that it stayed undeveloped. That's why it was purchased. It was very smart. Sets us apart. But here we have on our government campus 30 acres of land that now suddenly was going to be on the menu for a private developer to build on, a bunch of condos and hotels and office building and stuff like that. And very early on I said, I'm not interested in allowing for the trade-off of giving up public property to allow this private development to occur. Unfortunately, that perspective wasn't a universally received one by my colleagues, I'm honest to say it. All the rest of them have wanted to do this. And it was really a credit to a group called Save Boca, the Green Signs, who mobilized, educated people on the issue, and got people to learn about the fact that this all was happening. I was voting no every step of the way, saying this is not a good idea. I was doing my best to communicate to people, part of the job of elected officials to educate, right? But not at the early stages of this, not many folks were paying attention. But then more and more people started showing up to more and more meetings, and you're getting more and more signatures on petitions to prevent this thing from going forward. And so let me fast forward to where we are now. That development idea, the government campus project, the thing that caused Save Boca to start mobilizing and coming together and to unify, is going to be on the ballot the same time as my mayoral election, March 10th. And I'm going to get to the whole March thing in a second, okay? I absolutely stand with the folks of Save Boca in their desire and their effort to get that government campus project on the ballot and voted down. This is not something the city of Boca Raton should be doing. And if that comes as a surprise to any of you, I'm sorry. We will be communicating the fact that I've been opposed to this thing from the beginning, going back almost a year. Started when? It was like January, February, right? Yeah. So, back to the March thing. State, federal races have primaries in August, and they have general elections in November. When people think about voting, that's what they think about, right? They think election day is in November. First Tuesday after the first Monday, November. Got it. Well, here's the thing. Local elections in Florida, at least in Palm Beach County, maybe some others, strangely have their elections all by themselves in March. Which, on one hand, means the people who show up to vote are like really inspired to go and vote because most folks don't even know there's an election. But on the other hand, the turnout is really, really low. 10, 15% at most. So I think it was Myra who said earlier something about you couldn't let happen the idea that if you woke up the morning after the election and you didn't think you thought you could have done more, you didn't do it, you couldn't live with that. Let me give you a quick story. 2018 was my first election. This one had slightly higher turnout than normal. It was about 20%. I went into the election knowing it was going to be tight. There's 3 candidates. It was me and another person that were at the top, most likely to win. I won my first election and was elected the first time in a race by a margin of 32 votes. 32. Do you know what that 32 votes? That's like half of the number of people that are in here. Maybe a third of the people that are in here. 32 votes. And by the way, the night of the election, supervisor of elections said Thomson lost by 30 votes. So imagine how I felt about that, Myra. Think about what that means. That was like, if I had just gone and knocked on a few more doors, if I made a few more calls, if I had just done a few more things. Well, it turns out they reported that incorrectly. They hadn't finished counting. By the time they finished counting the next day, they realized that I in fact had won. But here's my point in bringing all this up. Your vote will never matter more, sorry, Jennifer, than in a local election where very few people take the time to go vote and most don't even realize there's an election happening. And I want to just bring up this point too. We need to gear up. 2026 is going to be a great year. 2026 is going to be a great year. It starts in August. It's going to culminate in November. But in truth, it doesn't actually start in August. How about we started in March? And I'll end with this, and I'm happy to take as many questions as people have. The city of Boca Raton has had a Republican mayor I actually lost count. I tried my best to figure it out as nonpartisan, but you can kind of figure it out. At least for 40 years. 40 years. It's time, Linda, it's time. And I can report the following, that I have 2 Republican opponents who are doing their best to try and out-MAGA each other. Okay? I'm not that guy. Definitely not that guy. But here's what I could really use your help with. Remember what I said about margin being super tight potentially, and your vote never mattering more? Your volunteer impact potentially could never matter more. If you could spare some time between now and March, which is only 2 months away, to knock on some doors if you live in the neighborhood, to make calls if you do or if you don't, to send text messages, to get the word out to folks who think like us and believe like us, that there is somebody like us who is running and wants to be the next mayor of Boca Raton, I would desperately appreciate that help, and I would desperately appreciate you doing that.
March what?
Oh, good question. March 10th. March 10th. It is the first Tuesday after the first Monday, but it's in March, not November. All right, that was supposed to end in like a crescendo. It didn't quite do that, but thank you everybody for listening to me. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
I just wanted Andy to explain, I lived in West Boca for a long time and now I live in the city. So in West Boca you don't vote for this election. So if Andy could explain kind of what the city limits are, and those are the people who can vote in this election. You have to live in the city of Boca.
Give him a second to answer.
That is a great question, Tina. Thank you, Senator, for asking that. So the eligible voters, which, by the way, don't let this dissuade you from volunteering and helping out. You don't have to live in the city to help elect the right mayor in the city. But the city limits are as follows. Pretty obviously, Delray Beach is the southern border. The northern border Delray is the northern border. Deerfield Beach is the southern border. The Atlantic Ocean is the border on the east, but the west is where things are tricky. If you live west of the Turnpike at any point, unfortunately, you can't vote for me. If you live on the northern end of town and you live east of the Turnpike, you're good. But if you're on the southern end of the city, like 18th Street, Palmetto Park Road, Camino Real, the border is as far east as Military Trail. So you have to live east of Military Trail. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We're gonna get around to annexing all the rest of that at some point, I think. But the point here is that I could desperately use your help in a volunteer way to help get out the voters that do live in the city. And if you're willing to do that, if you're able, I have Charmaine from my campaign this year, would very much like to talk to you and have your help going forward. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
I'd like to know why the current mayor of Boca Raton wants that project done. Is he getting paid off by the people that are building, they want to do this thing?
I don't know his actual motives as to why. It is clear that he wants it to happen. Well, there is. I've heard that as a rumor that there's some interest in having this propel him into his next. I should have mentioned that our current mayor is running to unseat Jared Moskowitz in Congress. Just reporting the fact. What his true motives are, sir, I'm not sure, but he has been adamant that he wants it to happen, and he wanted it to happen on his watch, which means it's been going really fast, like curiously fast, when there's something of this import probably should have been more deliberately done.
You're going to get paid off.
Hi, I'm still Nan Reiner, and I was one of those 32 people who voted for you in 2018, and all the other times you've run.
Let me clap for that.
I've been hard at work for my condo building for the last couple of days, and so I confess, I got the latest email from Save Boca about, and you can talk to me like a fellow attorney if you want to, what the heck is going on with now certain people on the council trying to undo the referendum? Please explain, and what in the heck can we do about it?
It's a great question, Nan. Thank you for that. So, remember I mentioned that it took some work by the folks at Save Boca, but if you'll allow me, I will say that originally there was a time when it wasn't clear that this project was going to get its own vote at a time before the Save Boca folks completed their work in getting their charter amendment done and the ordinance done. So I was looking at a meeting right at the developers who were proposing this. And they're not my friends. Like, I'm not their friend. They know it. And I said, David and Rob, will you agree to put this project, it's so significant, will you agree to put this project on the ballot so that the people of this city have a chance to have their voice heard? And they said yes. And then I went to my colleagues and I said, well, if the developer is saying yes, then certainly you all are going to say yes to this, even though I knew they didn't want to. They said yes, okay? So that date was finalized to be March 10th. I still believe there's still going to be a vote then. But in the most recent version of the agreement between the city and the developer, there was some new language that earnest people thought meant that there was going to try to be some way out of the election results if it were to not pass. I'm not going to let that happen. I came from, before I came here, I was at a city council meeting, and all of my colleagues, to their credit, said, that's not what we were trying to do there. There will still be an election in March, and this will still be on the ballot then.
Okay, thank you
Of course.
very much.
Yeah.
I have a question about something that's going on in Boca, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen in Delray. Ron DeSantis has enforced that Florida Highway Patrol and Palm Beach County Police Department participate in immigration and ICE raids. And it's my understanding that Boca Raton's Police Department is participating now. Delray Beach has not thus far. Is there anything as mayor you could do to change the police department's stance on where we stand with ICE?
Well, let me answer that by saying the following. That never came to us for a vote. Like, the city council never took a position on whether we should allow that kind of help to be provided to the ICE proceedings and their enforcement actions. But when I heard about it after the fact, I asked the city attorney, what's the deal here? And his legal position at the time was, cities have very little in terms of options to say no. A couple have held out. Apparently Delray is one of them. This is going back months. I asked him, I was like, well, how did this happen and why? He said the state exerts so much control over the cities that it was nearly impossible for the city to be able to avoid becoming a contract partner with ICE on that fact. As mayor, I will make sure that we revisit that.
Hi, Andy. Nice to see you again. I'm Cindy Bloom, and I'm the former president of the Boca Raton Friends of the Boca Raton Public Library, and I've known you since you were a young man on City Council for a long time. And I want to thank you for your support of the library for all these years. But we were talking about earlier with this new development that there's going to be no parking for the public library, and if they expect people to walk there, most people do not walk to the library. They go there and park, and it's a very busy, highly used public library. So I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Sure. Cindy, you are so right. The libraries that we have two of our own libraries in the city of Boca. They're one of the jewels of our city. My kids have it had to be thousands of hours at this point at our libraries. I love them dearly. The current government campus project, remember, this is the one thing that I've opposed, that I'm going to be voting no on, I'm going to make sure that it fails in March, would, if passed, take space out of the existing library parking lot and put up on it a large office tower that would have a parking garage. So I think my first objective is to make sure that this fails. I've been working diligently to make sure that it does. I will continue to. You know that. But I mean, I think beyond that, I'm not sure what else I can say. The parking garage in there may have some library parking for it. I'd rather us not even get down that road and preserve the parking lot that's there and the parking spaces for our residents going to the library the way that it is. Yeah?
Hi, my name is Sandy Sternberg, and I used to be a docent at the Boca Raton Museum of Art, and I'm familiar with Meisner Park. Are you aware of the fact that they're planning to have a huge cultural center built around Meisner Park Amphitheater and the Boca Raton Museum of Art? And the traffic there is already horrendous. The parking is just as bad. And I want to know, what you have to say about that.
Well, I think I may have some good news for you, Sandy. That proposed cultural arts center that was supposed to occupy what is now the amphitheater and the grassy knoll, to the east of there, is dead. For better or for worse. They had a deal a few years ago to raise a bunch of money in order to build this building that they had contemplated. They had benchmarks they had to meet to be able to raise the money on time. They didn't do it. So the deal is terminated. They have no rights there.
Hi, my name is Kathy Cather. I won't say real active, but I participate in a lot of stuff with the Forward Party. And I think, they're looking for candidates to endorse. And I think you and Jennifer are candidates that they would endorse. And that gives you all the independent voters. I think we're all on that email list and all that sort of thing. And they do like to focus on local. So if you can Google it.
I will Google it. Thank you, Kathy.
So just a quick follow-up on the 287G question. So we really appreciate that you are going to revisit it, and that's a really, really good commitment that you're making. But will you also speak emphatically against it? Because we had a panel here in November, and it was an immigration panel, and they told some stories that moved the whole room to tears. So definitely a lot of people are heartbroken by what they see. And there are mayors like Mayor of Chicago, like other mayors that have been very vocal about it and their disagreement with it. So will you also normalize speaking against it?
Yes, I will, with the exception of the following. FAU has its own agreement with ICE, or they're contemplating one. I'm in kind of a unique position at FAU. I didn't mention this when I was talking about, I'm a professor there. In addition to being a lawyer, I teach local and state government there. So it puts me in an awkward spot to be taking stances against the leadership at the school. So till now I have not, though I've helped some folks behind the scenes organize the protests that have gone on there. But yes, I can happily, you were saying normalize speaking out against that?
Yes, absolutely. Like I happened to be at the September 5th protest, again, that they organized, and it was against ICE. And the number of law enforcement officers there was honestly, it was not reasonable. It was such a huge amount of police officers that it can only be interpreted as an attempt to try and silence the students and curb their speech. So I feel like as a community, if we don't talk about these things, it's something that people will be afraid to talk about if people in leadership don't also speak on it.
Sure, then that's a fair point.